Hi, my name is Kevin Brennan, and I am the advocacy lead here in Washington, D.C. for the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation. I'd like to wish everybody a happy and healthy and wonderful International Myotonic Dystrophy Awareness Day. I'm going to be leading us today in a brief webinar that's going to focus on our advocacy work here in Washington, D.C. and around the states. This will be a presentation that is focused on mostly for a United States audience and focused on the advocacy priorities that we're pursuing here in the States. And with that, I will begin. So let's review quickly what we're going to learn today. We're going to talk about the status of Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation research and awareness, again, with a focus on U.S. priorities. I know there will be some folks listening from overseas. And we work with those folks on their sort of unique opportunities as they identify challenges that they're facing within their countries and how we can tailor and assist them in some of their advocacy initiatives that are based on some of their unique needs and the structure of their government. So we're also then going to talk about a new and emerging initiative that we're pursuing at the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation, where we're trying to grow our voice in Washington and in the States. And to do that, we're going to be working to recruit what we're calling advocacy captains in all 50 states and territories. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means and how we think that's going to really amplify our voice and create a whole lot more awareness and urgency among legislators and policymakers. And lastly, we're going to have a call to action. We want to talk to folks about what Congress is currently doing and what they need to continue to do to fund the main engine for biomedical research in the United States, which is the National Institutes of Health. And we want to talk to you about opportunities that you have, particularly in a presidential election year, to engage with your members of Congress, your state and local elected officials, to continue to build awareness around myotonic dystrophy. What is it? Why is it deserving of their support? Why is it deserving of scarce and precious state and federal dollars as we think about ways to continue to promote care and to cure? So the advocacy priorities that we've had for this year that we have continued to pursue are: one, continuing to maintain our eligibility, the eligibility of myotonic dystrophy researchers to submit grant applications and solicit funding as part of the Department of Defense peer-reviewed medical research program. This is a program that we've had tremendous success with, and each year we have to petition the United States Senate in order to provide, make sure that we remain eligible for this program. Second, we've been working very hard to obtain a specific line item of $10 million that is exclusively and solely dedicated for myotonic dystrophy research. And that is also part of the Department of Defense's research program. This particular program is called the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Program, so CDMRP. You've heard us say a lot. The other program is PMRP. So these are the acronyms of the programs that we're targeting to add to the funding that we are able to secure through the National Institutes of Health. And then lastly, we've been continuing to work with our advocates to do all sorts of things to promote International Myotonic Dystrophy Awareness Day today. And I'll just give you one quick visual example that I hang in my office here, which is a copy of the Senate resolution that we were able to pass several years ago with the help of Senator Kane, Klobuchar, and Lummis. Senator Lummis is from Wyoming, Klobuchar is from Minnesota, and Kane is from Virginia. That is the United States Senate proclamation announcing that September 15th is International Myotonic Dystrophy Day. And we've seen states, we've seen local governments begin, and our international partners begin to echo that as a way to continue to build this awareness and support. So that was one of our key advocacy successes that we're incredibly proud of. All right, so let's talk a little bit about federal funding. I know this, for those of you who have seen or participated in webinars in the past, this is a familiar slide, but it's a really, really important slide, and it's a really important story. And it's something that we hold out there to make sure that we're continuing to hold policymakers accountable so that they understand that we're keeping an eye on where we're headed in this. So the top line here is federal myotonic dystrophy research funding, fiscal years 2013 to 2024. So for this 11-year span, we've been monitoring closely and engaged with efforts to increase these numbers that you're about to see. So you'll see that the NIH number, which is just below that in white, it lists us starting in 13 at 10. We dipped to 9, and then we stay at around 10. So that it comes out to a total of $116 million. But if you factor in inflation, and all of us have seen, the price of bread and gasoline and other things increase, the cost of actually doing research increases. So we've seen an erosion of this. So while the number seems like it's been largely flat, it's actually been a bit of a decline. And that's been a troubling development for us that we're trying to address. So it can be very difficult to get NIH to move the needle per se. So you'll see here then the line below that is our PMRP funding level from fiscal year 18. That's the first year that we were able to get the Senate to make us an eligible condition as part of PMRP. And it was important to us because we recognized that we needed to, instead of beating our head against a wall in the NIH funding, we needed to find new sources of funding. And our advocates were incredibly successful. And just a hats off to the late Senator Dianne Feinstein from California. She was the first senator to step forward at that time and make a request of the Appropriations Committee in the Senate that we be included. Since that time, we've gotten a lot more folks who have written letters of support, but she was truly instrumental in helping us accomplish that goal. Since then, we've had support from Senators Durbin from Illinois, Senator Casey from Pennsylvania, and lots of other folks. But you'll see our advocacy has led to real changes here, right? We've got $23 million in total funding because of the work that everyone around the country has been doing to create awareness and make sure members of the Senate, in this case with PMRP, understand how important it is that we continue to grow the research pot and that there's a real opportunity here to change lives. So hats off to every single person, in the community that's helped make a difference. It is truly important. The work that you do matters, and it does lead to more dollars for research. So let's keep it up. Hopefully in the next year or two, we're going to see a line that says CDMRP, which is going to be a static, at least for a while, $10 million funding level that we'll start to add to this chart. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. So let's talk a little bit more about the PMRP program, okay? So the Senate's made it an eligible research focus for 7 consecutive years, which has been amazing. And it's funded almost $24 million in innovative peer-reviewed research. As I mentioned, some of our Senate supporters have been Senator Casey from Pennsylvania, Senator Dick Durbin from Illinois, Senator Dianne Feinstein from California. And one of the things we've done is we've developed an amazing partnership with the folks who run this program. So the PMRP program is based about 45-minute drive north of Washington, D.C., in a place called Frederick, Maryland, at Fort Detrick. And we've had numerous in-person and Zoom meetings with the folks that lead this initiative for several years now. And one of the important things is we've been able to be a liaison between that really important organization and our research community. So applying for a grant through this program is a little different than the program that researchers follow for the National Institutes of Health. And so it's been really important, and they've been so willing to work with us on setting up webinars that our researchers are able to participate in so that they understand what's necessary for their applications process. We've also been able to get folks in the community to serve as community reviewers. So making sure that we have representation from the myotonic dystrophy community on these peer review panels so that they can continue to make sure that folks understand what it's like to live with this disease, the complexity of the disease, how it affects daytime sleepiness, executive function, how it affects heart, the gastrointestinal tract, what is myotonia, all of these things so that these folks understand and have a greater appreciation And ultimately, the goal is to increase the chances of researchers throughout the country and the world successfully getting grants for research to continue to advance our knowledge of what causes myotonic dystrophy, and most importantly, what is this knowledge going to do to generate cures and new treatments. When I started working with the organization about 10 years ago, and for those of you who went to some of those annual meetings back in the day, there wasn't a tremendous amount of interest on the part of the biopharmaceutical sector. Now we're seeing folks enrolling in phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials, and hopefully we're not too far in the future where we're going to see the first ever FDA approved myotonic dystrophy treatment. And it'll be proved as a safe and efficacious treatment. So we've made a tremendous amount of progress, and this basic science, this basic research is the foundation for that. So again, the work that you're doing to convince the Senate to maintain our eligibility is vitally important. So in doing that, you're going to see a copy of what's called the Defense Appropriations Bill. That's the piece of legislation that we work to get included in every year. And so the language in that bill specifically outlines the amount of funding that PMRP will get in the fiscal year. So in the fiscal year we're currently preparing to enter, which is fiscal year 2025, which officially starts on October 1st, you'll see that they included in the Senate bill $370 million. And that there's about probably 60 different diseases and conditions that are listed in that. We didn't list them all here. But you'll see that we've highlighted myotonic dystrophy, sickle cell disease. There's a bunch of Angelman syndrome. There's a few other things that are included in here. And those are all eligible for funding. So there isn't a specific dollar amount attached to each different disease or condition, but there is an overall funding level of $370 million. So our goal is, again, to work with the program to make sure that our researchers are in a position to successfully compete for as much of this funding as they can possibly be awarded. So then we're moving into our second goal, right, which is the CDMRP funding. And that was our effort that started this year for the very first time to ask both the House and Senate to support our request for $10 million for specifically allocated funding only for myotonic dystrophy research, not for any other form of muscular dystrophy or any other disease or condition, only for researchers who specifically are doing work with myotonic dystrophy. So you'll see that there is 2 members of Congress who are listed on this slide. There's Congresswoman Jen Kiggins, who is a representative from the Norfolk area of Virginia, Hampton Roads, Norfolk area. She's a Navy veteran. She's a Republican member of the House of Representatives. There's also a gentleman by the name of Congressman Jared Moskowitz, who is from Florida, and is also a fairly newer member of the House of Representatives. And the reason why both of these folks are listed here and why you're seeing the headline that says that they are our Advocacy Award honorees this year is that they both stepped up, being asked by some of our terrific volunteers from Virginia, David Brennan, and some of the families out in Minnesota who were able to secure their support to lead a letter that we're going to talk about. I'm going to get to that next. So here's the letter that they authored. So one of the tactics that we've done this year and will continue to do going forward, which is why this is really important for folks to understand, is we're working with members of the House and the Senate. And one way to communicate support for an initiative internal to the House and Senate is to have a bipartisan letter from members of the House and members of the Senate to the leadership of the committee, in this case, the Appropriations Committee, that approves the annual Department of Defense appropriations budget for the year. So within those two bills in the House and Senate are the CDMRP program. And so the more members of Congress from both parties who can communicate support for our request, the higher the chances are that we'll be successful. So this year, the first ever year that we've done this, and we had a shorter time window to work with this year because the budget hadn't been finalized from the year before. So hopefully next year we're going to have more time, but we only had a couple of weeks to launch a grassroots advocacy campaign to get as many members of the House and Senate to support this. But Congresswoman Kiggins and Congressman Moskowitz led this letter, and I'm going to walk you through the number of folks who signed onto it and show you who they actually are. So this is the group of folks that said, hey, this is important. And every single one of these members of Congress got involved because of the work that you did or people in your community and state and congressional district did to say to them, this is important. I need your support. There are 435 members of the House of Representatives. So 11 is great. And I think it's fantastic for our first time out, but we've got to get more folks going into next year if we're going to be successful. We are not the only organization or patient advocacy group that is seeking to maintain their funding or to be added to this program. So there is, I don't like to think of things as a competition between, different worthy, charitable initiatives to help people who are living with rare disorders or chronic conditions. But there's only so much that Congress can do at a time. So we're going to need to continue to beat that drum and make sure that folks share our sense of urgency. So in addition to Congressman Moskowitz, we had a couple of folks on here. We had Angie Craig and Dean Phillips, who are both members from the Minnesota delegation. We've got Paul Tonko from New York, Tom Swazi from New York, Jim McGovern is from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We've got Brian Fitzpatrick, who's a Republican from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We have Congresswoman Debbie Dingell from Michigan. We have Congressman Earl Blumenauer from Oregon. And we have Congressman Jimmy Panetta, who is from Northern California. So most of these folks are coming back. We assume are coming back this year. I'm going to get into a little bit around the upcoming election. But there are a few folks who are actually, we knew were ahead of time are retiring. So Congressman Phillips and Congressman Blumenauer have all announced that they are retiring. So we're going to lose at least 2 of our 11. It's usually easier to get folks to sign on to something that they did the year before, although with staff changing from year to year, you may find that you're walking into an office, as I talked to you about some of our upcoming advocacy, where they are new to this issue because they're new to the member's office. But so that's why, again, it takes a lot of work to continue to maintain and build awareness in these relationships. So on the Senate side, out of the 100 members of the Senate, we were able to get 5 members of the Senate to sign on to this letter, which again is a very huge accomplishment. In the Senate, we only had about 2 weeks to generate this level of support. Again, we had it truncated, and I won't bore you with the details, but we didn't have as much time. Normally, we'll have about anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to put a letter like this together and then to launch a grassroots advocacy campaign, but we didn't have that time this year. We should have more soon. But this letter was important and was signed by, as I mentioned, Senator Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota, Senator Sherrod Brown from Ohio, Senator Tim Kaine, who had done the International Myotonic Dystrophy resolution that I showed you guys earlier, along with Senator Klobuchar. We had Senator Ben Ray Lujan from New Mexico, and we had Senator Raphael Warnock from Georgia. So I think I'm going to get into the election a little bit. I think most of these folks will be returning. Senator Brown, if you're closely following politics, is one member who is in a tough race as a Democrat in a red state in Ohio. So we'll see if he's returning and keep you posted. So again, talking about why were we successful in getting these 5 senators and 11 members of the House? It's because you all were, meeting with members of Congress, like Senator Fetterman here from Pennsylvania, who's given a thumbs up in this photograph with one of our wonderful advocates. But many of you also sent emails through our new website, not the new website, myotonic.org is not new, but we added a new capability. So we now have something that I'll talk to you a little bit more about. But through that website, you all were able to send almost 3,000 emails to Congress so far this year. And that's made a difference. And you can see some of the states that are in darker colors, like California, New York, and Florida. Again, there's a larger population we recognize in those states, but those are ones where we've had more success in generating emails. But Texas, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Georgia, we've seen a lot, Washington State, Oregon. I guess I would just point out, you'll see a couple of states where we didn't have any emails. And so again, as we look about building our state advocacy captains, this will be an important function. We're going to want to make sure, that Wyoming and that, Georgia, that Alabama and Mississippi and Maine, that we can generate more community involvement. But this is a great chart that shows real great progress, particularly, again, for a disease that we're just getting started. So being an advocate, making a difference, what does this all mean? Why do this? We're in a day and an age where politics can be very partisan. It's hard to have a conversation with somebody about these things. I'll be honest, as somebody who lives and works in Washington, D.C. and has worked on Capitol Hill, this has been a particularly unproductive session of Congress. I had heard a quote from somebody the other day that said 7,000 bills had been introduced in the United States Senate over the last 2 years of this session of Congress, and only 25 major pieces of legislation have passed. That's historically low. If you remember your history, when Harry Truman ran for re-election back in the 50s, he ran against what he called the Do Nothing Congress. And so this Congress hasn't done a lot. And these are all things that I know weigh people down. They weigh me down. Why should I get up and do this if Congress isn't going to be doing the things that they need to do? But they are passing the appropriations bills. We are seeing where we're included. So, think about, those important victories that we've had, that we need to continue to be engaged. Otherwise, as I say here, if the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation doesn't do it, who will? If members of Congress are to understand what we're doing, if we don't do it, who will? They're not going to just wake up in the morning and have some revelation that myotonic dystrophy is a serious, rare disease that demands their attention and their support. If we're not there being persistently and polite, but being persistent in our requests and seeking their support for our help, they're not going to do it. They're going to move on to some other, disease group or organization or other things that they're hearing from. So we have to be out there. It's vitally important. So if they don't know about myotonic dystrophy, they're not going to step forward and sign the letter for CDMRP. They're not going to support our PMRP requests. And those numbers will start to go down. So we want them to go up, and we want our advocates to continue to be doing that. Remember, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more, particularly in an election year, you are a constituent. You matter to them. They pay attention to the folks in their state and in their congressional districts. You have a powerful story to tell. Those stories move people. There's a reason why Senators, Klobuchar and Kane and Congressman Moskowitz and Kiggins all got involved. They heard from our advocates. They heard from folks about what's happening, and they decided and were moved by those stories. So we need to do more of that to move more members of Congress. And you absolutely are key to that. So one of our points of action for this year, as we think about, on this day, this Sunday, September 15th, International Myotonic Dystrophy Day, what are we going to do? Well, for one, we're right now in the midst of Congress grappling with the final elements of this year's upcoming budget. So they need to hear from us. They're hearing from lots of different organizations out there, our sister organizations in the disease space, be they rare diseases, be they from groups like the Every Life Foundation or from NORD, or even from the larger chronic disease groups like the American Cancer Society, the Arthritis Foundation, the Lupus Foundation. All of us are trying in this period of time in September to speak with one voice on behalf of the NIH to make sure that they understand that funding is vital, and they need to pass a budget that includes $51.3 million in funding for the National Institutes of Health. It's an important, source of funding for the researchers that we care about and who are doing so much great science, unraveling the mysteries of myotonic dystrophy, and again, providing that fuel that is leading, the commercial companies, the commercial biotech sector, to be able to pursue targets and look at opportunities to address many of the markers for myotonic dystrophy and get those treatments through the FDA and approved for patients. So as I mentioned, there's a continuing resolution that's being considered. We need to let them know we're paying attention. We want this budget passed. There are no FDA-approved treatments for myotonic dystrophy. There is no cure. And the only way to get there is through more federal funding for research. So we need to remind them that Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation foundation research is not keeping pace with inflation. And again, these funding increases are vital for our research community to continue. It is vital for us to attract new researchers into this space so that more folks are out there pursuing the science, which is going to change lives and ultimately help improve this situation. So I just encourage everybody to do that. You're going to be able to visit the website. There's going to be tools for you to be able to go in and find your member of Congress, find your senator if you need that, and craft a statement based on sort of a preloaded document that gives you the tools you need. So being an advocate, we feel, is easy. We continue to try to make it as easy as possible for you to engage and exercise your constitutional right to petition Congress on behalf of our advocacy goals. You'll see a QR code here that you can use to go directly into the section of the site where you will find a preloaded message for our NIH message that we'll be able to use to communicate to Congress. Shouldn't take you, more than a minute total, but that minute is so incredibly valuable to help spread awareness on this International Myotonic Dystrophy Awareness Day, making sure that Congress embraces our urgency. So this is the Action Center. This is just a snapshot so that you recognize kind of where we are. But if you see here, this is our CDMRP request, which is also preloaded that folks use to communicate. On the right-hand side, you will see where you have a preloaded message that is in there to help guide your conversation. We want to make that as easy as possible, folks. But what's really important to understand is your story matters, okay? So take this message, make sure the main thrust of it stays the same. So if we're asking for $10 million for CDMRP, make sure we maintain that message. But below that, please think about including, say, a paragraph of information about what it's like to live with myotonic dystrophy, how much you want to see an FDA-approved treatment, how important Congress's role is to help you and your family who are living with myotonic dystrophy. But it's important that they hear these stories because they make a difference. These are the things that stick in the minds of legislators when they think, well, why should I do this? And they'll think back to somebody in their state or their congressional district who took the time to include a personal message to them. It's great to just send a message overall and they will get that. But you have to remember in this day and age, when you've got bots and spamming of people and people are doing other things, it's really important to take this opportunity to share your story so that they understand that there's a real person at the other end of that email and that there are folks that really are paying attention to how they vote on these issues or if they sign on the letters that we request. Your involvement is really key. So let's talk a little bit about the work that we're doing to build out our, what I call our grassroots advocacy capabilities, right? Meaning having community members engaged in every single state, every single part of the United States, whether you're a state or in my case, the District of Columbia. We are a district, we are not a state, but Puerto Rico, other places in the United States that are part of the country, but are not states. So we want to have this capability everywhere. We want to have folks who are helping us lead the way. So we've got advocacy captains, if you will, who are in some of the states that are highlighted in blue. But you can see here, we got a lot of work to do. If you start from A to, in this case, V with the United States, you got Alabama all the way to Vermont. Every state where you see gray on this list, and I won't go through each state, and you can go back and look at these slides later, but you can see where we need folks. So I would encourage folks to contact the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation or contact me specifically. My contact information is going to be on the end of the webinar, but let me know if you're interested. And I'm going to walk through in a minute, what does it mean in more detail to be an advocacy captain? But these are the areas where we're looking to get more folks involved. So to be an advocacy captain, we're looking for folks who can spend a little bit of time. We're not looking for this to be a major burden on your time. We know folks have a lot to do with managing their families, helping to care for folks who are living with myotonic dystrophy. So we want to make this as easy as possible. So we're trying to, we're going to be doing a couple of advocacy trainings and virtual meetings through the course of the year. These are to give folks updated information. So as we head into next year and we start to mount our campaigns for PMRP and CDMRP, we're going to want to talk to you about where things are. The process will start with the new president coming in and giving their budget to Congress, and the congressional committees, the appropriations committees, will start a process of doing hearings and constructing those budgets. So there's going to be a window of time in late winter, early spring, where we're going to be needing to then launch our advocacy campaigns, right? And you're going to need, as an advocacy captain, to start thinking about, okay, who are people in my community who I can recruit who might want to participate in sending those emails to Congress, right? We want to get those numbers up. So when we had 2,700 people email Congress, wouldn't it be great if we got 10,000 people next year? So you'd be, as an advocacy captain, helping to recruit new people, promoting the website, promoting, how to come in and send a letter, talking about how easy it is, and simply doing basically what I did as you start to learn that. So some of this training will help you understand how to do that. Where are there opportunities to engage with more folks? And then as we move into the key sort of appropriations season, we've been training these new state advocacy captains to request virtual meetings, or if by chance you're in DC or you have a chance to visit with a legislator in person, of course, do that too. But we're helping to teach folks how to request a meeting and how to do a meeting with the staff of a member of Congress, or in rare cases, with the members themselves. So we're working to create mentorship opportunities for folks that have already done this. I can tell you from experience, this is hard. When I worked on Capitol Hill, I did about 11 years working for senior members of the House. And that first time that I had to do a meeting on my own, even though I had taken meetings and met with organizations like the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation, the first time I had to walk in and sell an idea to those very staff who were my colleagues, it was hard. But that first time you get it under your belt, it just snaps. You have an ability and an empowerment that is so amazing. And so we want to teach all of you who are interested how to do that. And that's really going to be the engine that drives this advocacy machine. These are going to be the things that you start to create relationships with the staff and with the members of Congress. When you go back to them, you can mention that, hey, we were here in April. We're following up to find out if you were able to sign that letter. And then they're way more likely to do what we ask them to do when they know you're going to be coming back, and that you start to really do those basic building blocks. So the advocacy captain responsibilities are incredibly important, and they're a central element of what we're trying to do to get more research dollars out to researchers who are going to help us find a cure and treatments. So we're going to be doing advocacy alerts again as the year goes on. So making sure you're promoting them within the network, highlighting them for folks, and then coordinating all of this through me as kind of the central hub of this effort. I'm here to be your boots on the ground in Washington, so to monitor what's happening, to understand what's happening, to inform, how we're approaching members of Congress. So as you feed me information from those meetings and from what you get in the way of return emails, I can go follow up with offices in person. If you identify an office where you think there's an opportunity, I can physically go in and request a meeting and talk to them about it. So it's a really important set of responsibilities. We think it's really fun. I came to Washington because I love what we do. I believe in this country and its potential to do good. And so I think this is just a great opportunity for us to do good and to get more folks involved in what we're doing, and you can play an important role in that. So as I was showing again, that proclamation, we've had folks all around the country who are having success in getting their local and state governments to declare, September 15th today, International Myotonic Dystrophy Awareness Day. This is pretty simple. And again, it's a teaching tool. I'm sure it's a little intimidating for those who haven't done it to have to approach an elected official to ask them for something. But again, this is a great time of year to do it because they're asking you for certain things, which is to vote for them. So reach out to the governor's office, reach out to your state legislator or mayor or city council members and ask them, hey, do we have a process at the state or local level to issue proclamations for different, worthy causes. And if they say yes, which I think they will, because it's an easy thing for them to do, it doesn't really cost them much money. It's a way to help make organizations like ours happy and to create awareness. So in general, I think you're going to find a welcome and opening conversation there. They'll say, sure, there is. And then, we have some information on this, but in general, since this is so spread out, it's really up to the advocates to ask their members, well, what is the process? Can you talk me through what we need to do? I think in most cases, there might be an applications process, which should be, again, very simple and basic that you have to fill out. Generally, they want to make sure, is this a legitimate cause? Are we a legitimate organization? Are we pursuing this for commercial benefit, which would be a no-no? So they want to just make sure that if they do a proclamation, they don't look silly or foolish or seemingly if they've done something wrong. I like to sort of refer to this as the New York Times test, right? If somebody will report on the proclamation, in the state of Florida or Minnesota or somewhere, a reporter wouldn't find that somebody had, improperly given money to that member of, the legislature to do it, or that the organization wasn't a sham organization, or the disease wasn't something that was a conspiratorial thing. So that's really the only reason there's a process there, is just to make sure that they're doing something that's legitimate. So I don't think there's much to be concerned about in there. And everyone that I've seen so far, they're very basic and simple. We have a draft proclamation that you're able to use, which we can provide to folks that are interested. So just let me know, and we'll make sure that you have a copy of that. Feel free to schedule a meeting with them to talk it through, but really work with your local folks that are interested in whatever it is they need to do. It should be a pretty straightforward process based on the folks that we've worked with who have gotten this done so far. Okay. So as I said, provide them with the draft of the proclamation. I think that if they're able to do it, this is a great chance for awareness. So find out if they'd want to do a public event with you, where they have a copy of the proclamation. You can take a still photo. Maybe there's a way to invite local media to be there. Maybe there's some community newspapers. Certainly, myotonic.org would want to publish and promote these things on the site. So there's all sorts of ways to use that proclamation once they've carried forward and done it to do social media. It's a lot of fun, and folks have done a really great job. And it really then starts to help build that relationship. Those folks remember that they did it. They take pride in it. We can continue to go back to them, maybe even ask for more things beyond just the proclamation. So have fun with this. I think it's a great, way to organize community members. It's a great way to train folks in advocacy. And it just does great work in the awareness space. So this, again, is a copy of the awareness resolution that we did several years ago that I held up for folks. I have this framed copy that's signed by Senator Kaine, and there's one out in Oakland in the the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation's headquarters. But I'm really proud. Every day I come in and sit down at my desk, I look up and I see it. And I'm really proud that we were able to do this. And this is a copy of that resolution that hangs in our offices out in Oakland and in my office in Washington, D.C. So I mentioned to you, we're in an election year. Okay, so I just wanted to touch very briefly on what this means. So every 2 years, the House of Representatives, every single one of the 435 members of the House of Representatives are up for re-election. Okay. So they're out, you're going to see them in your communities. You're probably already seeing in races, maybe where there's tight races, you're getting a lot of ads that you're seeing on television. But they're going to be out knocking on doors, doing rallies in October. That's going to be a big push, town hall meetings. And so I want to make sure that folks are thinking about this as an awareness opportunity. Okay. So, you might find that there's an incumbent running for re-election, or there's a new person running. Take some time to go on their website, find out where they stand on the issues, find out if there's somebody that you might be comfortable with, or maybe you're not. But, I'm not asking folks to do something that doesn't align with their political views and their beliefs. But if you do find that there's somebody that you align with and it's an opportunity to raise awareness, maybe you want to volunteer or be supportive of them in some way. Or at the very least, attend a town hall meeting where you can ask them or highlight, what we're doing on myotonic dystrophy research and ask that they consider supporting our PRMRP or CDMRP requests going into next year and letting them know that this is important. But I think they're way more, their antenna are up, their ears are a little bit more attuned to their voters and their needs in this period of time because they're asking for you for their support. So one important thing just to point out, we are a nonprofit 501c3 organization. We are not allowed to engage in political activities as an organization. So the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation cannot endorse candidates officially or unofficially, and we can't take, a stand on an issue that has any of that political component, but you as an individual are completely free to do whatever you want politically. And I know we've had a number of our really strong grassroots advocates in various states who do that. And it can be a Republican, it can be a Democrat, it can be an independent. It doesn't matter. You as a citizen have the right to engage in political activity. But again, just understand the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation cannot be a part of any of that political work. So as you're just doing awareness, perfectly fine. But just understand that distinction. And if you have any questions, certainly email or ask me about that. In the Senate, we have 100 senators. The way that the Constitution set up Senate elections is those terms are 6 years. And 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election every year. So you've got states that I've highlighted here where we have one of those senators is up. So I mentioned, Ohio here and Montana, just to give you an example. Those are two Senate seats that are currently held by Democratic senators. So Sherrod Brown of Ohio and John Tester of Montana. Those are seats that there's heavy competition with Republicans trying to unseat them. But you can see in this map, it'll tell you states where they think that folks will hold those seats. So Casey is Pennsylvania. As I mentioned, he was one of our supporters. Blue there. It's not a strong blue. So he's someone who is working hard to hold on to his seat. But then you could look at, California. That is one that Adam Schiff, who's a congressman from the LA area, who is running for that seat. He's predicted to win. He's been helpful to us in the past in supporting our requests for CDMRP. So if he's in the Senate, he'd be somebody that we're going to be paying attention to and hopefully would be able to cultivate and earn his support for that letter that we talked about. So just wanted to highlight this so folks are aware that we are an election year and that there are opportunities for folks to engage in awareness in an appropriate way. Okay, so now what can you do? So I talked about a little bit of this. So I mentioned again that we can't endorse candidates, and it's important to know. It's important for you to do your research, find out when the candidates are going to be in your town and your community, and take an opportunity to go. They hear from a lot of folks on sort of the top line issues that we all are aware of. If you watch the debate between former President Trump and Vice President Harris, you heard a lot of those issues. So understand when they hear something that's not in those sort of issues around, gun safety or issues around reproductive rights or those things that tend to get a lot of attention, they hear it. They really pay attention. It stands out. So it is a really great opportunity to mention something that they might not know about, and they may want to spend a little time talking to you about. So remember, your voice is important and they want to hear you. So that's your opportunity between now and election to make a difference. So sort of here's your final charge, okay? We are powerful and we are growing in our power and our strength, okay? 10 years ago, again, there weren't a lot of biomedical research, companies that were engaged in research and clinical trials about myotonic dystrophy. There are a great many now, and those of you that visit the website and look at the pipeline know that. Many of you have participated or had a family member participate in one of those clinical trials, and you know that. We're starting to completely change the dynamic here. Members of Congress are starting to understand more and more the power that we have. So we need to continue to grow and maintain that. So just remember that, there might be days where you wake up and you're not feeling at your best, or you've had a hard visit with a clinician, or your symptoms are really, bringing you down. Remember your power, okay? The work that you're doing matters. So the folks that we're talking to, our senators, our representatives, or even our state and our local folks around the world, these are folks that work for us, okay? I don't take the term public servant lightly. They are public servants. They are here to serve us, okay? And so remind them of that, not in an obnoxious or a rabble-rousing or a shaking your fist way, but say, hey, use that as a way if you're feeling unsure or if you're feeling a little tentative about your outreach. Remember that, okay? Remember that that's their job. Their job is to represent us. And so when they hear more of us communicate what we want, we hope and expect that they'll follow our lead and do what we ask. So again, laying the foundation for getting more members of the House and Senate next year to sign on to the PRMRP and CDMRP letters, okay? Remember, we got 5 senators and we have 11 members of the House. We want to get more folks on those letters next year, and the time is now to do that. So I like to think of this as a great adventure. I have so much fun getting to do the work that I do. When I left Congress and having served in a few senior positions and I had to explain to my kids what I do for a living, I used to have to say, well, I work in the Capitol general area. You know where I am. Now I work in an office that is just some nondescript office, but I get to sell ideas. And so, the ideas stem from what are the challenges that people with myotonic dystrophy and our families face every single day? What are those challenges? And does the federal government provide solutions to those challenges? And how do we get them to adapt and advance the ideas that are going to change the lives of the people we care about? That's what advocacy is all about. So we take those ideas. We need more funding for research. Eventually, in the not too distant future, we're going to have FDA approved treatments. I anticipate that some of those treatments will be expensive. Maybe all of them will be expensive. And we're going to have insurance companies and maybe even Medicare and Medicaid, where there'll be challenges around securing coverage and reimbursement for those drugs. So remember, the work that we're doing to build this advocacy, platform is going to start to shift, and we're going to have to start talking to insurers, public and private, about the need to get access to those. So this is all going to continue, and there's going to be a lot of hard work and important work again. But we're going to get there and we're going to achieve great things together. And that to me is exciting. And that power that you have that we're going to unleash is going to do great things. And we're going to have so much fun together, helping each other, educating members of Congress and bringing them along. It is very exciting. And I'm thrilled that you're here today with me to talk about these things on International Myotonic Dystrophy Awareness Day. We are making a difference. We are going to continue to make a difference with your help. So I want to thank everybody for taking time today and going forward, since this will be up on the website and folks will be able to watch this video and this webinar and share these lessons with others. I hope everyone today has an absolutely wonderful International Myotonic Dystrophy Awareness Day. I hope you get to spend time with your family and your friends, building awareness, sharing your stories, and making a difference. And I thank you all so very much for your time today. And I look forward to our adventures in the future. Thank you.